Hey guys, welcome back to the channel and welcome back to the BVM Super Bandit build. We're continuing with the wings in this video. This is wing video number 2, which is going to be video number 8 in the build series. Lots of work to do in the next week to get this thing ready for paint. So without further ado, let's dive in. All right, so last night we finished off with gluing our carbon fiber plates to our gear plates here, our flex plates. So the first thing we're going to do is we are going to tap these flex plates for 632 thread size, and we're also going to be getting into the aileron surface very quickly here. That's the first things we're starting off in this video with. So let's tap these guys. Pretty straightforward. Just tap them. We've already got a nice 440 hole done, so it should be easy. All right, so we've got both of our landing gear installed in the wings. Our flex plates are bolted down. That worked out good. There's a little bit of finessing and stuff to do, but I think that works out perfect. So what we're going to do now is we're going to move on to our aileron surfaces, and we're going to work on getting those guys wrapped up as well. So what that means is we're kind of backtracking into the stuff we skipped over, right? So we did all this stuff, got our hinges done, and we're moving back to our ailerons here. So first thing to do with the ailerons is we drill a hole through the root of the aileron, and that goes through the carbon actuation horn / pivot, and we'll be installing a dowel in that area. So this is our next step that we're moving back to. What I've done is I've gone in and sanded our surfaces. I need to get the sanding done so we can make sure we get everything lined up properly. So we've come in here, we've sanded everything out. What I'm going to do is mix up some more fiberglass putty, and we're just going to go in and just do some more touch-ups here. Just little areas just to make sure we're 100% perfect. And then also we're going to fill in areas like the open area here on the wing, open area on the aileron. We never did the aileron holes there, so we're just going to get that stuff going as well too. All right, so we've got all of our ailerons sanded and ready to go. The ailerons I'm happy with. Again, we've talked about this a fair bit, but you'll see in a spot like this where we've sanded, it looks like we've sanded down to the wood. That's not the case. This is just through the primer, so the fiberglass cloth is still there. So our aileron's all ready to move to the next step. And the wings themselves, we've done a bunch of sanding after our second round of filling, and pretty happy with everything there. We've got a little bit of touch-ups left to do, but we can do those after we get the ailerons finished. So I believe the next step in the manual is we need to prepare the ailerons. So that means getting our nye rod and everything installed here. And that's the next step to gluing the pivot points onto the wings. Now we did make all of our hinge points here to glue our carbon in, made our holes on the top side of the wings. The only thing I didn't do yet was the clearance hole for the arm, for the aileron arm. But we're going to wait till after to do that. And this is an example of one of those areas that we really need to go back and touch up with some filler. But again, we'll do that after, once we do kind of a final round of filler on the wings. Okay, so we're working on the ailerons next. And what we need to do for the ailerons is we need to have the flap attached to the wing so we can get everything lined up depth-wise. So that will, now what we're doing is we're putting the aileron into the surface, and we're going to adjust our depth and get everything lined up based on the flap and the wingtip portion. All right, we have a perfect setup here, and there we go. So our ailerons are tack glued in place. Now, one secret that we kind of found here to make life a lot easier was to push down on the wing right here and on the flap. So I had Ward pushing down on the flap, and here we got the aileron installed. This all sits on the other side, the top side of the wing, sits perfectly flat on the surface that you're resting everything on. So it worked out really well. We were holding everything down, got this lined up, got that lined up. Actually, I guess to take a step back, we had the flap sitting like this. We got the trailing edge of the tip lined up, and then we push the wire in because the wire sits into the wood that's out here. And once that was spot glued or put in place, then we lined up the flap aileron joint and we spot glued all 3 locations. And this is absolutely perfect down that line. So we're going to take this apart now, and then we're going to glue our hinge points in the wing as the next step. And then we're working on gluing that piece and shaping the leading edge of the aileron surface, just like we've done in the other surfaces. All right, so we've got our blocks glued to the leading edge of our ailerons, and we've glued those with CA. We've checked the fit of the wire in the end, and we are all good. So next thing to do is to take our razor plane, which we've used before, and we need to get rid of all of our material here. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm not going to worry about the height at all. So this distance right here, I'm just going to worry about getting these flush with the surface of the aileron. Now, if you look at these blocks, the aileron gets thicker at the root and thinner at the tip. So we're going to have more material to get rid of here. So that's the first thing, is shaping those down. Around the control arm is going to be a little bit of using file and stuff like that. You can't use the razor plane. We might be able to get to about here. So I'm going to shape those, and I'll show you guys the next stage when we get these matching the surface dimensions. All right, so we've squared off our edging here to match the surfaces. And now what we're doing is just putting it on the actual wing. And the point of this is just so we have an idea of how much we need to take off. So we don't want to keep our full depth here, but we want to get it fairly close. So we've got about a 1/4 of an inch-ish that we need to reduce the height while we're adding a radius to it. Oh my gosh, you gotta push record. Sakes. Oh. All right, so we've got our take 3. We've got our ailerons done, and we've got everything shaped nicely. We've got a nice gap here on the aileron to wing surface. So that turned out good. This is becoming shorter and shorter every time we video it. So I'm glad we didn't do any relief cuts here for the horn, because when we go to full deflection, we've got 17 millimeters of angle here, or movement, and we only need 13 for setup. So that's more than enough, and we didn't have to put a relief cut there, which is good. So we're gonna take this one step further. The manual or the plans here call for the optional balsa triangle fill. So we are gonna do this triangle fill, not out of balsa. We're gonna use pine instead. So what we're gonna do is cut a piece the length of the aileron. We're gonna chop a piece off of this that's too big, so when we glue it in, it's gonna be sticking up too high. And then what we're gonna do is use our razor plane and slowly get rid of it, and that's gonna be a beautiful finished touch for this aileron. It's gonna make it look better, aerodynamically better as well. All right, so we've got our little triangle done. We've got to do some filling still in a couple areas, but they turned out beautifully. So you can see there, really wasn't that hard once we got the system down. So basically what we did was we had everything connected like this, held the surface in the up position like that, tucked the triangle in, glued it in place, and then we had to use a plane to get rid of the top part. There was only like maybe a millimeter sticking above, so we just sanded that down. Once that was done, we gave it a nice sand, and then just lightly sanded, block sanded the trailing edge here of the little triangle, just to make sure it's nice and solid and squared off. Turned out beautiful. All right, so last round of filling, I hope, on all of our wing stuff. So we've got our gluing holes filled here on our flaps, gluing holes filled on our ailerons. We've got gluing holes filled on our wings, and we also did a little bit of filling on that joint where the little triangle is that we added in pine. So we're gonna let this stuff sit and do its thing, and we'll come back and sand it. All right, guys, so we're just doing a final sand on all of our items here. So we've final sanded the flaps, the ailerons, and the other thing I did with the ailerons is we treated the leading edges here with thin CA. So because this is balsa, it's fairly fragile. So we soaked thin CA onto there, and it is much stronger now, which is lovely. And then with our wings, I just finished sanding the joint here where we installed that pine piece. Now we'll flip the wing over and sand out our holes there for our gluing holes. All right guys, we got everything sanded out. Now we are moving on to the aileron fitting on the wings. So that is the next step in the manual. We're going to gather our parts up, which aren't that big, and we will get ready to do our ailerons. So on these wings, we basically have two big steps left. We've got the ailerons, gear doors. So ailerons we're going to focus on first because that's what's next in the manual, and then we're moving on to gear doors after that. These wings are very close to being done. All right, so we've gone as far as I'm going to go on our aileron mounts here, and the reason for that is because the next steps involve mounting the blocks, but also mounting the servos on the blocks. So we don't want to do any of that stuff until we're ready to put our servos in. So we're going to leave that as it is. We'll move on to the next step, which I believe, so we're bypassing all of that stuff. So we're moving on to the next step, which is going to be the cover plates here. All right, so we've got our square blocks installed in both servo aileron areas. Now what we need to do is work on our hatches. Now BVM includes some pretty cool hatch systems here. So they include this G10 plywood structure. Now the point of that is, let's get this installed the right way. So you get your hatch fitting, and you want your hatch to fit maybe just a little bit recessed. So at the back edge here, it's like less than a paper width recessed. The front, we've got to do a little bit of sanding on the mounts there. But then what you do is you glue the G10 material onto the door or the hatch, and what that does is it eliminates the seam, which is great. So when this is all painted, it looks immaculate. This is exactly the same setup that was done on the Tams F18 that we just completed recently. Didn't do any video on it, but it's such a cool way to do this because it almost makes these hatches invisible. So of course you still see the 4 screws, but this looks so good when it's done like that. So our next step here is to just do a little bit of sanding on these mounts just to make that hatch sit a little bit shy of the surface, not much. All right guys, so there is one of the hatches ready to drill and install. So and of course they're see-through right now, so you can see how ugly they are, but turns out really well. So what we're going to do next here is we're going to screw, countersink screws. Then we can cut out the slot here for the servo arm. But the other thing is when we glue this, obviously you want to make sure you sand both sides. And we used medium CA here and kind of just put it as much as we could and sunk it down in there, and it just filled it up perfectly. So that whole area is all glue right now, which is just awesome. All right, so we've got both of our aileron covers done. Just doing a couple little final touch-ups here. There was a little nick on the trailing edge of this aileron, so just did some more fiberglass putty and installed that. So we'll sand that down once it's cured. But next thing to move on to is the gear door setup. So main gear doors and everything, this is our last big portion of the build. And then after this, we have a bunch of little things coming up. So that's what we're working on next, is the main gear doors. Let's gather our parts up and take a look. All right, so we've got all of our parts laid out here. The first step on the doors is to sand down the little Dubro name off the hinges. So we've done that. Actually, I used my planer. That was much quicker and easier. So a couple of things that we're missing from the kit. Number one, we were missing all the hinges. So these are just out of our stock here at the shop. And Nez is keeping the plans warm here. But the next thing we're missing is the BVM Duro strut collars. So these are one of the things that the door mounts to. So the door mounts to the strut lower portion with the collar, and then the trunnions also drilled out for mounting the door onto the trunnion. So we're missing those. We're gonna have to see if we can find them. We don't need them right now, fortunately, and we can continue with this without those parts. So the plans have good door diagrams here. We've got our strut diagram. We've got the whole door area diagram, so lots of good info here. All right, so what we do here is we take a piece of wood and we take some scrap 1/16 material, some of this ply, and we make a little pair of strips that are glued down, so they're going to be 3 1/4 inches apart. And this is for door curving. So as we're gluing these strips in, so the main one is the G10 strip here, we're pushing down on the door, and that just makes a little bit of a curve in the door, which ultimately makes the right curve for the wing. So pretty cool little setup. I did glue my finger a crap load right there, so we'll have to sand that down before we put the next layer on, but kind of a cool setup. All right guys, door number 1 is complete. Now you can see the nice curve on the door there. It looks really good, but the door angle follows the wing perfectly. And once you've got all these layers glued together, these doors are incredibly stiff. I was kind of doubting that, but really, really nice. All right, and we had a fun little gift show up yesterday from Mr. Adams. Thank you so much for this. This is a ball joint tool, custom made. Very, very nice. This is one of those cool tools that always belongs in the toolbox. Thank you so much for this. I appreciate it. It did arrive safe. All right, guys, so we're moving on with the gear doors here. So we've mounted our big cover plate. And the next step in the manual is to mark out the width here at the root of the wing, and you're marking this at 1/4 inch. So this depth is 1/4 inch, and then we need to get rid of the line that we have made there. So we'll use our Dremel and get rid of that line. So this picture right here shows it. So we get rid of that, make it 1/4 inch, and then we do recesses for our hinges. All right, so we've got our door fastened on here. It's a fairly straightforward process. The manual actually explains it very well. You start with the aft hinge, which is this one here. Put 2 drops of CA once you're happy with positioning and stuff. Stick it on there, let it cure, and then checking the position of everything. So of course we're going to be checking the position of all of our hinge lines. Now we can sand the outside here, but we kind of wanted to make sure we were happy with it. Fairly centered anyways. I've got a little bit of sanding to do. And then we deal with the front hinge, which is this one here. Exactly the same procedure. Once we're happy with those, we drilled through and put the screws through there. Now you do have to be mindful if you're using air that you keep your air holes clear and everything, but we're not using air on this plane, so that's not a big deal at all. But we've got that done, and then we glued our little black arm there, right there, and as a final step for the arm, countersunk that hole that was already pre-done, and then we installed a screw in there which will almost disappear when this is painted. And so the way this actuation is going to work is we're going to have a servo. So the normal air cylinder mount is down here. We're actually going to put a servo down there and have the arm actuate the opening and closing mechanism. So that is the main gear door. Now the other gear door I think is even more simple. We basically have 2 screw holes here on the trunnion, and I think there's a spacer that goes on there first, but that's basically it. So super simple there. Of course we want to make sure that we're happy with our fit on all of this stuff here, and if we're happy with our fit, then that one wing gear door is virtually done. All right, so we got one side or one wing done so far. This is the right wing, and I think I'm pretty happy with everything. There's a couple important things here. The plans show that the little G10 pieces you put inside are supposed to come to where my mark is. Problem is your door has a wider piece at the bottom here, so if your G10 comes all the way there, the door only closes like that far without like really pushing down on it. So I cut those G10 back a little bit, put some nice curved corners on them, and now the main gear door closes beautifully. And I did sand the leading edge a little bit of both of these doors just to make sure that it had a bit of a forward slope to it, so there was no catches on the leading edge of the wing. Super important on the leading edge of the wing, of course, because that's where the airflow is coming. Had to shape this door down just a little bit here at the base, like took about 1 millimeter off from about the midpoint. You can actually If you look closely, you can see my pen mark there, what's left. So I started there and came in a little bit. That was just to get a nice even shape, because if we put this leading edge nice and even, this was actually touching back here. So it's kind of a weird shape going on there. So that got done. Put a little dent in the wing here. I'll have to fill that. That was with the saw. And the only last thing I think that I'm going to do here is there's a bit of a ridge at the base. So we've got a block here, a block there, and the axis panel just comes straight across. Well, the wing, of course, has its angle to it, but the cover is, there's no support across this whole strip. So I think what I'm going to do is put a piece of G10 across here. I think I'm going to have to take this off and make sure it's not going to interfere with anything. And the point of that, of course, is that's going to bring the cover plate here up more in line with the wing panel, so you don't have a funky ridge there. I think that's what I'm going to do. We're going to take this apart and make sure. But one wing's done. Now we're going to do the exact same thing to the left wing. All right, so I did end up adding a little G10 piece right here, and that is perfect. That's exactly what we needed to do. It's not going to interfere with anything. When these are bolted down, now we are even there, and that is great. I'm really happy we did that. That's a nice little touch to make sure that this stays nice and even. So just a couple of little details I'll share with you guys. So we've got the whole panel here just sanded down nicely and fitting, and it's good. Then what I do is I take some thin CA, like I've talked about many times, and we run thin CA all along the exposed balsa. Now I haven't done the inside yet because we may have to sand some of this area out, so we'll leave that till after. We had our holes all marked, so we drilled our holes, and then again I took countersink bit, countersunk the screw holes, and then we took some thin CA and we soaked the balsa. Again, just strengthening up all of our material there. It's pretty crucial, also just good building practice. All right, so just plugging away here on the other side and go to do the leg door and realize that I have made two identical ones for the other wing right there. Oops. So we're going to pick up some ply. We don't have any ply that's the right thickness, so we'll pick some up and we'll remake the doors. Dang it. So not stopping us though from continuing on here. So we're going to do our little poly ply pieces, our stops in there, and then this wing door will be complete with the exception of the door that mounts on the trunnion and the gear. All right guys, so we got the other gear door material and created another gear door. So this one is all done. And we've got it all spaced out and adjusted and everything, so happy with that. So what we'll do is we're going to send the wings off to paint like this. So we'll bolt these things on, and then the painter can just take them off as he needs to. Other wing here, we're going to put that all back together, and then we will move on to our finishing steps. All right guys, and that is going to wrap up wing video number 2. Next video in the series, we are doing all of the finishing touches before paint. So what does that mean? That means all the last little final details on the aircraft before it goes 11 hours west to the painter. So we got a bunch of cool things to do to finish up this aircraft, but the wings are done and we're rocking along. So we got a couple days before this thing gets shipped off. So thanks guys for watching. If you have any questions or comments, list them down below. Timeline. So we're actually filming this in the past. We've already started on the fuselage stuff. So, but up to this point, I think we are at, I counted the other night, 132 hours to get to the wing completion point. So I think we're going to be somewhere in the range of 140 to 150 hours when this thing is ready for paint. Craziness. So that's it guys. Thanks for watching. If you have any questions or comments, list them down below. Don't forget to check out Lighter Side of RC After Dark. And that's where we do a lot of the behind the scenes stuff. We do live streams from the shop for 2 hours-ish. Every 2 weeks-ish. It's kind of sporadic. So anyways, thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next video.